Hi, friends. Our last book for Reduce, Reuse, Recycle Week is Franklin Plants a Tree. I love the Franklin books. They are written by, let me get her name right, Paulette Bourgeois. So she is the one that writes the stories. And the illustrator who makes these great Franklin pictures is Brenda Clark. And I don't know if you have Franklin books at home, but I love all the Franklin books. So let's see how Franklin plants a tree. Franklin could climb trees and swing from branches. He liked to play with his friends at the treehouse and go for walks with his family in the woods. So Franklin was excited when he learned that Mr. Heron was giving away trees for Earth Day. He could hardly wait to have his own tree in his own backyard. There's Franklin with all his friends. On Earth Day, Franklin got up early and dug a huge hole right outside his bedroom window. He wanted to plant his tree as soon as he got it home. Tonight he'd invite his friends over to build a new tree house. Tomorrow he'd look for an old tire and make a swing. Franklin grabbed his wagon and hurried off. He didn't want all the big trees to be taken. In the park, a large crowd was lined up in front of Mr. Heron. Franklin saw lots of boxes, but he didn't see the trees. Maybe they're not here yet, he thought. Then he saw Rabbit leaving. Don't you want a tree? Franklin asked. I have one, Rabbit replied, tapping his knapsack. Franklin was confused. Franklin thinks he is getting a big giant tree, right? Is that what he's getting? Let's see. Rabbit reached into his knapsack and pulled out a tiny tree. That's not a tree, Franklin exclaimed. That's a twig. It's a baby tree, Franklin, explained Beaver. It's called a sapling. Mine's an ash and Rabbit has an oak. Well, I'm not getting a sapling, Franklin declared. My tree has to be big enough to play in today. Silly old Franklin. He's getting a baby tree too. Mr. Heron isn't giving out big trees. Let's see what Mr. Heron says. But when Franklin got to the front of the line, Mr. Heron gave him a sapling the same size as the others. Could I have something bigger? Asked Franklin. This is a sugar maple, replied Mr. Heron. Many years from now, it will be very big indeed. Franklin nodded sadly. He put the sapling in his wagon and walked slowly home. Look at Franklin's face. Whoops. How do you think Franklin is feeling? How is he feeling? Is he feeling a little bit sad? A little bit disappointed? I think he is. Franklin sighed as he stared at the huge hole in his backyard. He shoveled earth back in until the hole was small. Then he went to get his sugar maple, but the sapling wasn't there. Franklin looked all around the garden and up and down the lane. It must have fallen out on the way home, he decided. There Franklin looks a little bit surprised or startled, doesn't he? Because he lost his tree. At lunchtime, Franklin told his parents about losing his tree. But it doesn't matter, he added. It wasn't big enough to play in. Big or little, you promised to care for it, said his father. Franklin slumped down in his chair. All right, he sighed. I'll go look again. Franklin still doesn't look very happy, does he? He's still a little disappointed about that tree. He was hoping for a big one. Franklin followed the path back to the park. By the pond, he saw Beaver. Her sapling was tied to a big stick marked with notches. It's a growth chart, Beaver explained. In 3 years, my tree will be taller than me. Thought Franklin. He began to look a little harder. Look at Beaver. I think Beaver's really excited about her tree. In the meadow, Franklin saw Rabbit with a watering can. I've planted my sapling where it can get lots of fresh air and sunshine, explained Rabbit. And I'm going to water it every day, he added. Franklin thought about his sugar maple. If it didn't get sunshine and fresh air and water, it would never be taller than him. Franklin started to hurry. I think Franklin is getting more and more excited about his new baby tree. Near the woods, Franklin saw Bear painting a small fence bright red. Inside it was Bear's sapling. "This will protect my pine tree until it's big and strong," Bear explained. "I don't want anyone to step on it by mistake." Franklin thought about someone stepping on his sugar maple. If that happened, it would never grow big and strong and be taller than him. Franklin's friends are so excited about their trees, and that's making Franklin get more excited. Franklin told Bear everything. "I've looked all over," Franklin moaned. "Now what do I do?" "Maybe someone found your tree and gave it back to Mr. Heron," Bear suggested. Franklin cheered up and ran off to find Mr. Heron. That was a great idea that Bear gave Franklin. Back at the park, Franklin saw Mr. Heron picking up boxes. "How's your sapling doing in its new home?" Mr. Heron asked. "I lost my tree, Mr. Heron," Franklin replied. "I've looked everywhere, but I can't find it." Mr. Heron reached into a box and lifted out a sapling. "Is this it, Franklin?" he asked. "Someone found it on the path." "My tree!" cried Franklin. "Thank you, Mr. Heron. I'm going to plant it right away." Mr. Heron smiled. Who else is smiling in this picture? Franklin is smiling. He's happy and excited to go plant his tree. Before Franklin left, Mr. Heron showed him a photograph. "That's me when I was your age," he explained, "planting my first tree." "Did it grow?" Franklin asked. "It sure did," Mr. Heron laughed. "We're standing under it." Franklin looked way, way up. "You planted the treehouse tree?" he exclaimed. Then Franklin looked down at his sapling. He said thoughtfully. Mr. Heron's sapling that he got when he was a little boy has grown into this big, giant tree that's big enough to hold a treehouse. Franklin hurried home. His sapling held safely in his arms. He planted it and watered it, and then he checked on it every day. And every day, Franklin was sure that his tree grew a little taller and a little stronger, just like Franklin. Franklin is happy and excited to be growing his tree, isn't he? Planting plants and trees and flowers and vegetables, all those things help the earth. I think it was Ella in our Zoom meeting that said that is a good way to help keep our earth healthy. So that's another thing we can do. And I know a lot of you have talked about planting things this spring. You guys put videos on our Facebook page about the different things you planted. And others of you have just gone out and looked at all the beautiful things in your yard that have already been planted there. So happy Earth Day again. And we will talk next week about a whole new subject. See you on Monday. Bye.